Why we always argue about the same stuff all the time, or circular causality, what it is and how to escape it. Hi, my name is Jacob Spillman. I'm a licensed professional counselor and licensed marriage and family therapist in Portland, Oregon. Welcome to my community education series on relationships and communication. This presentation was recorded in my office on June 1st, 2009. Today we'll be talking about circular causality, or why couples always seem to argue about the same stuff all the time. We'll be talking about what creates the patterns couples get locked into, and I'll be giving you about a half a dozen different ways to get off of this relationship hamster wheel. This is a community education series, and so if you know of anyone that you'd like to share this presentation with, feel free to provide them with the address to the website, www.jacobspillman.com. In future lectures, I'll be talking about the various types of communication traps that couples fall into, how to avoid them, how to communicate with your partner successfully, why negotiations between couples fail, and how to make your negotiations productive. So if you sign up or receive my newsletters, you'll be notified when new lectures like these are posted. Or just come by www.jacobspillman.com and check out what's new. I've tried to pack this lecture with information that's helpful and useful, but please remember this lecture is for educational purposes only. And it's not meant to take the place of an assessment and treatment by a qualified mental health professional. If you'd like to obtain information about the services I provide, please visit my website or call me at 503-227-3187. If you're outside the Portland, Oregon area, visit the American Association of Family Therapists at aamft.org for a family therapist in your area. So, let's get started. We usually think of causality as linear. One cause has one effect. The scientific method attempts to isolate one cause and one effect to establish lines of causality. We've become so attached to this way of thinking that we forget that it sometimes takes years for scientists to isolate a single line of cause and effect. This is because reality is much more complex than this. When we try to boil down our thinking to a chain of linear causes and effects, we wind up reducing the problem artificially, and that means we're really not seeing the problem for what it is. In real life, one cause can have many effects. In the picture on the right, we see a representation of a nerve cell. One signal from this nerve cell sends many pulses of energy to send information to multiple neighboring nerve cells. In reality, many causes can have one effect. The slide on the right is a hurricane where multiple causes like sunshine heating the atmosphere, interacting with the temperature of the water, air pressure, the temperature and pressure of the air and water in the surrounding areas all constellate to form this one hurricane. So sometimes causality is not linear. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's circular. For instance, a computer virus is a small program that replicates itself and then gives itself a command to begin the process over again. The last command of the program becomes the first line of the new program, causing the start of the whole process over. The same thing happens in human interactions. We see this sort of thing in the workplace all the time. Stan and his boss are stuck in a pattern that mutually reinforces each other negatively. Let's start in the upper left-hand part of the chart. Stan gets nervous and feels intimidated by his boss. Stan makes mistakes when his boss watches him. Stan's boss gets concerned about Stan's job performance and speaks to him about his mistakes in a tough, condescending manner. So the question now becomes, why are Stan and his boss stuck? The first thing we should notice is that Stan's nervousness and his lack of confidence is affecting his ability to perform his tasks well. If Stan addressed the source of his fear, he might be able to improve his performance and exit the circle. Now look at his boss. What would happen if his boss looked at the whole pattern and decided to change how he addressed Stan? What would happen if the boss became more neutral and pointed out Stan's strengths and accomplishments, then gave him constructive feedback about how he wanted Stan to change? Stan might settle down, feel less intimidated, and make fewer mistakes. And so you can see both parties are being driven by their emotional reactions. It's these emotional reactions that set up their expectations. And these expectations are keeping both Stan and his boss locked into the circular causality. Obviously, unless the circular causality is broken, the situation will just deteriorate. Later on in our presentation, we'll talk more about how to get off this hamster wheel. But for now, let's look at two more common examples of how linear causality can keep a couple stuck. First, there's the dance of pursuit and distance. Mary asks Stan a question, hoping to restore her feeling of connection with Stan. Stan feels intruded upon by this and responds by stonewalling her. Mary feels abandoned and feels compelled to understand Stan's thoughts so that she can bring him closer to her in the relationship. Mary asks Stan another question, hoping to restore her feelings of connection with her. Again, notice that both partners are locked into the circular causality by their emotional reactions. Mary fears being abandoned, and Stan feels intruded upon. If Mary was able to tolerate the ambiguity of the situation more, Stan wouldn't feel so intruded upon, and that would allow him to feel sufficient emotional freedom to be more authentic in the relationship. Stan can break out of the circular causality by being more forthcoming and ending his stonewalling, and this would reduce Mary's fear of abandonment and allow her to give him more space. Let's examine another common pattern. Let's talk about the dance of the over-adequate and under-adequate. At the beginning of the relationship, Mary thought Stan was spontaneous, adventurous, and humorous. Stan thought Mary was stable, strong, and responsible. Today, Mary thinks Stan is irresponsible and lazy. Stan thinks Mary's controlling and rigid. They argue over housekeeping. Stan thinks she's a nag. She's obsessed with cleaning. Mary thinks he won't do anything unless I get on him about it. So let's start in the upper left part of the chart again. Mary waits to see if Stan does his chores. While she waits, Mary anticipates that the chores won't get done. Stan procrastinates or does something else he thinks has a priority than the chores. Mary sees the chores not done, and she believes that this is yet another example of Stan's irresponsibility. Mary nags Stan to do the chores, certain that these chores would not get done if she wasn't there to nag him. Stan complies, but resentful of the nagging, he decides that he's going to do the chores in his own time. Mary sees the chores not done, and the cycle starts over again. In some instances, Mary might be so convinced that Stan is not going to do the chores that she impulsively charges in and does them herself. In these situations, Mary has actually trained Stan to not do the chores because Stan receives no positive reinforcement for doing them. As a matter of fact, Stan will give up on doing the chores because he feels he's going to get nagged by Mary under any circumstance. And Stan's perception is that Mary's nagging is just the price he's going to have to pay for her to do the chores for him. Notice that these negative rituals are locked in place by emotional hypersensitivity, hopelessness, anger, blame, avoidance and stonewalling, and fear. I'd like to address each of these issues separately, but before I do, I just want to say that I wish that there was a simple and easy answer to get out of circular causality in a relationship. You know, I once had a colleague who had a sign on his cubicle that said, "There's always an easy answer to any complex problem, and it's usually wrong." And so I'm not going to try and provide you with any magical solutions. What I'd like to do is provide you with some key concepts that will give you some direction on the way out of the circular causality bind. Many of the solutions for getting off the hamster wheel might be difficult, or they might require you to develop new skills or see your partner in the world differently. Truthfully, providing you with the amount of information needed to explain each of these concepts is fully beyond the scope of this presentation. Volumes have been written about these notions. Instead, what I'd like to do is start by pointing you in the right direction regarding how to approach the problem of circular causality in your relationship. Now, here's where I'd like to give you a little bit of a warning. Let me pose this question to you. What if the relationship is the circular causality? You see, sometimes negative circular causality has allowed the relationship to deteriorate so much that the only thing left of the relationship is the circular causality, and this presents a real danger to the relationship. You see, if you eliminated the circular causality, you'll eliminate the relationship, and that's sometimes the main fear of the person who's avoiding or stonewalling. It's often difficult to tell how far a relationship has been damaged by the circular causality, and so there's a real risk that has to be confronted whenever you decide to break one of these circular causalities apart. The question really is, how much positive things do the couple share in terms of real affection, love, respect, friendship, emotional resource, and strength that allow the relationship to continue after the circular causality has been eliminated. In cases where there's been considerable damage to the relationship, it's necessary to build positive rituals into the relationship to give each party some emotional resource in order to continue on. And so I think this is a good place to stop. In the second part of our lecture on circular causality, I'll be talking about a half a dozen different ways of stopping these circular patterns. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation and found it interesting and useful. The second part of this lecture can be found at www.jacobspillman.com. And more information about couples and relationships can be found on my website. Also, check out my blog, Psychology, Values, and Common Sense, at jacobspillman.blogspot.com. As I've mentioned before, this is a community education series, and if you know of anyone that you'd like to share this presentation with, feel free to send them the URL, www.jacobspillman.com. In future lectures, I'll be talking about the various types of communication traps that couples fall into, how to avoid them, how to communicate with your partner successfully, why negotiations between couples fail, and how to make your negotiations productive. So come by the website often and check out what's new. Also, while you're there, check out the recommended readings section and the bookstore. Thanks for listening. This is Jacob Spillman reminding you to keep your head in the sky, your feet on the ground, and your heart pointed towards heaven. Take care.